Many of the startling tales about radical responsibility that I make are about cavitating, holding, and navigating spaces, and especially transformational and healing spaces, let's say edge spaces, that are at the edge of the known or what is comfortable. And it's not a very ordinary, domain to explore. However, if you're here, maybe it's because there's a part of you that this part of being a space holder is awakening. And for me, I have this vision of human relationship happen in a space. So even a couple, even a partnership is holding space for a space of possibility. But holding space for a team, the main skills that are often missing is about holding space for a context in which human can unleash their potential instead of defending their position. So a lot of the stars are about these subtleties or these sense or these distinction or these domains of holding space for a culture where human potential is liberated instead of controlled. And the next star is also in this direction, and it's a very specific let's say sensitivity that are about the different forces that are happening in a space. And mostly you'll notice these forces, which are called the affirming, sustaining, and denying force in group work. They become a lot more obvious. And they're pretty self-explanatory in terms of what that means. But I want to say that these are energetic forces, but they come into a space through the people, through participants, in terms of what they do or what they don't do, what's their purpose, what's their orientation towards, like how they are relating to the space. So for example, the denying force is clearly, especially in a transformational space, is the denying force is trying to slow down the transformation or the healing that's happening. It's trying to block it through questions or distractions. Especially, I think one of the technology is to create a problem, trying to create a problem in the space, create a conflict, whether with other participants or with the main space holder, so that the work, the energy of the space is not oriented towards like pushing the edges, but about trying to solve or fix, let's say, a problem in the space. So, whereas a sustaining force, it's people play out the sustaining force as people who are participating in the space, that are playing, that are present, that are offering their time or their attention or their love or their questions in a way that makes the spaces alive, because there's this reciprocity. So there's the listening goes into this vacuum of a sustaining force, for example. And the affirming force, which is the third force, those are the people that, especially along the main space holder, usually the main space holder is an affirming force, unless they're hooked and they're getting emotional reactive, which would then they become the denying force. But the affirming force is really about people who are alongside the space holder or the purpose of the space and take it further, like push the edges more potentially than the main space holder can, or in different direction or different domain that the main space holder may not be able to or not see. So those are kind of like the three main forces. And what I found useful in distinguishing them is that let's say, people shift from being a denying force to being an affirming force to being a sustaining force. They move from one place to another depending on sort of their mood or their, what is like their emotional state or their instability or their imbalances or their commitment, or like there's all these forces also happening in the participant. And that it's not personal. So as a space holder, for me, it gave me a lot of space also of not making the people who were, for example, denying my space of like, I can't trust them. Actually, they're just role-playing. They're playing out the part of the space, the unconsciousness part of the space, which needs to be played out, let's say, in this theater called the space, or called the discovery, like the stage that we're on. Somebody needs to play out this unconsciousness, and they've taken on this role. It's usually not a very pleasant role, but what I've noticed is if, for example, as a space holder, I try to shut down people who are playing out this denying force, for example, by removing them from the space. For one thing, it will show up in somebody else. So then if I keep removing people who are denying the space, I basically end up alone. And even if, for example, I remove the denying force and nobody takes on this role, like this theater role in the space, usually the outside world needs to take on this job. So the police will show up, or the electricity goes off, or if I'm, online, the technology just breaks down. There is a way that the unconsciousness is present in the space, and better know who, like I keep the denying force to some degree in the space, so I know who it is and how it's showing up, and I can be a yes and also for this person who is just taking on this role maybe for just a moment. So it's including this denying force, and can also be very useful to some degree of yes and what do you see, like yes and what else is possible if you're resisting this space. Is there any way that you wouldn't resist this space? So there's technology of, especially improvisation, of being a yes and to denying forces. And also to not make it personal for the affirming force of being, oh, they are my friends, or we're buddy, because they're helping me. And instead, for me, I regard more people who are playing out an affirming force as these archetypal colleagues, or these, at this point, they supporting the space is supporting themselves. And I can give a few examples of affirming forces. I especially experienced this with women. One time I was in an online women's space that was open, and a woman that I didn't know showed up, and I started just the space deepening context and answering question. She didn't say anything for 45 minutes, but I could feel this yellow vibration and light coming from her that just said, keep going, I want you to win. And there was something so warm and so empowering, and it was this kind of dual pods happening in the space that were like blowing wind into my wings. And the other memory I have so clearly, especially when I didn't know the people, was in a space in Spain. There was 80 people in a university. I did not know anybody. Most people did not speak English. And in the corner over there, I could barely see them. There was 3 women who were obviously friends. And again, they didn't say anything, but there were this brilliant shower of support, and this shower of, we love the distinction of the spaces, the research that you're doing, and thank you for bringing it to our community. And at the end, one of the women came and wanted to thank me, and in return, I thanked her for this kind of exchange that was happening in the space. That is especially for me as a woman and a builder of women's culture, is okay. This is what can happen in a space of research that's really pushing the edge and challenging modern culture. Women can stand together and say, this is possible and this exists. So, and in this STARR, there's a lot to say about the different forces, and I hope that just having those distinctions, you can now start noticing in your spaces who is playing what role, and how can you use them not for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the space. I wanted to give a few experiments of, if you wanted to start you moving from one role to another, and notice, notice what happens when you play out a denying role, a sustaining force, or an affirming force. And what I recommend for playing out a denying force is, don't do it in a transformational space. It will happen anyway. There are many other spaces to play out a denying force. For example, in a town meeting, or in a meeting, it would be a public meeting and an open meeting where, for example, your town is planning to have a data center being being installed in the middle of town, or build a dam, or there's fracking, or not have recycling anymore. Any decisions that that basically are for the purpose of profit or corporate satisfaction, you can sit in the meeting and decide to be a denying force as an archetypal force of not going with the purpose, of not being snapped into the story of this is what's best for the town, or if you contradict us, something bad can happen. Instead, really sit in the meeting and ask the question, or saying, this will not happen, this is my land, and these are the consequences of what you're offering, and I will not go along with it. But often, when somebody does that in the kind of ordinary meeting, at the end, a lot of people come and say, thank you for speaking up, because I could not reveal that I was angry, or I did not agree. But because you could say it, now I have courage, or I have more confidence to speak out, like what is important for me and my community. So that would be the experiment as a denying force. And if you want to experiment, like sustaining force, usually most people are sustaining force, so there's not much experiments to do about that. But if you want to be an affirming force, like practice being an affirming force, you could do things, for example, that are asking, an experiment is asking open-ended, like open question, vulnerable question, either to a specific person in the group or to the group itself, that has the result of building matrix. So people, when they think about this question, when they answer this question, they're discovering some new parts of themselves, or they're discovering new parts of the space. That would be a practice of being an affirming force. Another practice you could do is, for example, for a game world, or for a team or project, is being an affirming force. You would make a commitment that serves the game world itself, that advances the game world itself, that expands the game world. You make a commitment and do it. And the commitment could be things such as writing an article, or making a video, or holding a space in that game world. A commitment to discover a new practice or a new process and documenting it, and then sharing it with the group. So things like that. Another experiment for being an affirming force is appreciating. So appreciating, noticing the way maybe the space holder or other participants are shining, or are making an effort, or you're seeing some transformation, and being a force of appreciation for the qualities of being and the qualities of doing, as in efforts, that how people are being in the space. That's also an experiment for being an affirming force. Great. If you have questions, you can post them in the comments. And also, if you do those experiments and have noticings, please share them so that the community can learn alongside us.